I recently reviewed the Lenovo ThinkPad P14s Gen 5 laptop. But Joel Michael, you might ask, which one? The AMD or Intel model? Both, my friend. Well, at least the most interesting versions of the two. That means I reviewed the AMD-based P14s with the Ryzen 7 and 120Hz OLED screen, and then I reviewed the Intel model with the Intel Core Ultra 7 CPU, larger battery, 120Hz IPS, and Nvidia RTX 500 GPU. After I reviewed the AMD version, I immediately declared it to be my new mobile daily driver over the Asus Zephyrus G14. Now the time has come to see if this Intel model will supplant the AMD ThinkPad to have this privilege. It's time to get down to business and evaluate these business-oriented laptops.
Slap Tech.
For those who are unfamiliar with my comparison method, this will be a direct head-to-head in each category from my regular reviews with a maximum score of 5 per category to a total of 70. This means that just because the AMD ThinkPad scored a 62 out of 70 against the Asus G14, it might not get that same score against the Intel ThinkPad. The scores are also based on my needs as a casual gamer, long-form 4K video editor, and Microsoft Office lackey. If you agree or disagree with my comparison method, let me know in the comments below. And for the sake of saving time, I'll refer to the AMD version as the AMD and the Intel version as Captain Kirk's poorly casted stunt double. Just kidding, I'm calling it the Intel. I'll start by looking at the AC adapters. Extra bulk and weight sucks, and the longer the cord length, the better. The Intel houses the RTX 500 GPU, and extra power draw means an extra large 135-watt adapter. The AMD only has its iGPU, so the minimalistic 65-watt adapter is all it needs. Well, guess what? You can still use the 65-watt adapter with the Intel, and while it does complain, it still charges the battery. Yes, using a smaller charger prevents the Intel from expressing itself to its full potential, but there's nothing the AMD can do that the Intel can't with the 65-watt charger, so they both get 5s. As for battery life, the Intel might seem like it has a clear advantage with 75 watt-hours to the AMD's 52, but it all comes down to how thirsty each CPU is while smothered with battery saver. Well, it turns out there's no arguing with physics, and the Intel wins with over 8.5 hours of internet work use to the AMD's 5. The worst part about this is knowing that better software would give the AMD at least another hour and a half, like how G-Helper extends the battery life of any compatible Asus device it touches. Thus, the Intel will get the 5, and the AMD is far enough behind to be given a 3. The build quality of these two laptops should be the same because they're both Gen 5s, but they're actually cased with completely different chassis. The AMD is made of recycled plastic all around, while the Intel is a sandwich with recycled aluminum on the top and bottom and recycled plastic around the keyboard. It seems that the Intel is a different body style altogether, with downfiring speakers, slightly larger dimensions, and a single hinge apparatus in the middle, just like the P1 series. The AMD has separate hinge housings and speaker holes for top-firing noise blasters. I've noticed that the AMD creaks a little when handling it, and the Intel has greater structural integrity, mostly thanks to its more robust cooling solution. I'm also unable to remove all signs of use from the top cover of the AMD with just a microfiber cloth, while all surfaces of the Intel can be easily wiped down to look brand new. The only slight I have against the Intel is the finish on the keyboard keys, which is more reflective and can't look brand new after the first gentle cleaning. To the detriment of both, using a dry abrasive cloth like that of an old t-shirt rag will wear away the finish on at least the touchpad keys, a lesson I learned with the AMD to not repeat on the Intel. Overall, the Intel takes this category with a 5, and the AMD will skate by with a 4 because it's not as good as the Intel, but how the hell am I supposed to give a lower score in build quality to a ThinkPad P14s? Since they're both the same model, that means the same weight, right? Wrong. Thanks to the more intense cooling solution on the Intel, it weighs almost a whole ass pound heavier at 3.55 pounds to the AMD's 2.8. That's a seriously huge, noticeable difference between two 14-inch laptops. I love how light the AMD is and how chuckable it feels. This weight, alongside the tiny 65-watt adapter, gives it a pretty big bonus, and the Intel now has to deal with a 2-point penalty at 3 to the AMD's 5. Both of these laptops put out a reasonable amount of heat. While doing internet work or retro gaming in battery saver, they both don't get uncomfortably hot at all. And while PC gaming or anything more intense, they'll be uncomfortable for an unprotected lap, but are okay on a suitably adorned pair of legs. They both get 5s. Now let's look at the holes in the side. You might have already noticed that the Intel doesn't have a smart card reader or SIM card slot. They are optional to have, but the buy link in the description is for a model without these ports. That's okay for me, I don't need either of them. Really, the only tangible difference between these two is that the USB-C ports output DisplayPort 2.1 on the Intel, and the AMD only outputs 1.4. That's still of no concern to me when even this outrageously wide monitor only supports 1.4. For this reason, they both get 5s. The guts in both models are mostly not compatible with each other. The batteries and motherboards can't be swapped, and also the OLED screen won't fit in the Intel, and the 75 watt-hour battery won't fit in the AMD. Otherwise, they both have full-sized, upgradable NVMe SSDs, soldered Wi-Fi cards, and more than adequate copper cooling for the amount of performance that they bring to the table. Oh, and 2 SO-DIMM slots in both models. 8 points! Just kidding, only the max of 5. The keyboards look a little different on both models, though are functionally the same. They both take a firm press and respond with a quiet treble click. I greatly prefer the Gen 3's keyboard with its softer action and muted frequency response. I'd give them both a 4 if I could, but they might as well get 5s for being tied. But wait a minute! The Intel is going to get a 4 because of the iridescent finish on the keycaps that will always look a little bit worn after just the first cleaning. Come on, man! And a 5 for the AMD because of its cleaner finish. Both displays on these laptops have their advantages and disadvantages. They're both high-res, both 120Hz, and get bright enough to use on a cloudy day, but not direct sunlight. The AMD's OLED panel has colors that pop, making my retro games look even more gorgeous than on the screens they were designed for. The Intel's screen is slightly higher resolution and has an incredibly organic look to it, almost like every frame is professionally printed on high-quality paper. Picking a winner between these two screens is very difficult for me, but since they are different, I have to pick one over the other. The overarching aspect that's going to pocket the W for the AMD is the almost zero amount of ghosting. Motion in Windows 11 and games looks better on the AMD. We'll leave it up to the PC gaming section to divvy up the points based on frame rates. Even though I think it's annoying when the OLED screen does its local dimming thing for idle backgrounds and the taskbar, it's worth putting up for the far better motion. The AMD gets the 5 and the Intel will suffer with a 4 because while it does have noticeably more ghosting, it's tolerable for a picky bastard like me, doesn't have any perceptible input latency, and I don't have to worry about burn-in. My viewers who are sensitive to PWM flickering will want to reverse that, if not dock the AMD even more points for potentially giving them migraines. Ugh. The speakers are the same units in both of these laptops, but the AMD's fire up through polar opposite holes in the chassis, while the Intel's fire down and are closer together, blasting away with a little less pronounced stereo separation. Neither have good bass, but the AMD seems to be more apt at filling a room. Thanks to the speaker orientation, the AMD gets a 5 and the Intel will take a 4. Webcam performance is virtually identical on both laptops. I find that the picture has zero discrepancies in a well-lit room, while the Intel is slightly grainier in low light. No one in their right mind should let it tip the scales in favor of one over the other, so they'll both get a 5. System performance of both of these laptops is sure to be a hot-button issue. AMD's best and brightest AI packing CPU versus Intel's versatile, also AI packing CPU. Well, guess what? Laptops with the next generation are already available, and both of these CPUs are built more for delicately sipping battery juice rather than inhaling it and vomiting benchmark scores like CPUs in bonafide gaming battle stations. If those power-hungry CPUs are the Tesla Plaids of the world, that would make these laptops hot hatches, like the GR Corolla or the Golf R. You can't go wrong with either one of them, and both chew up calculations more than fast enough for 4K video editing on the go. Keep them an energy saver, and the fans rarely spin in the AMD. The Intel will spin more frequently in energy saver, but very quietly. When fully unleashed for 4K video editing, the Intel might have stronger burst performance, but when under duress for an extended time, it'll throttle down to the AMD's level. All that being said, I'm super stoked to try Premiere Pro with the RTX 500, as I've only used Premiere on the AMD so far. While it has been a very good experience, I think the RTX 500 is gonna kick it up a notch in response times and shave at least a couple minutes off of exports. The Intel will get a 5 and the AMD a 4. The ability to play PC games is very important to me, but I've become much less picky about the detail levels over the past decade or so. My line in the sand is Snake Pass performance. If a laptop can do Snake Pass in 1080p max details, it can play anything, and that's good enough for a 5. The RTX 500 in the Intel has just enough power to do so reliably. It chokes at its native res of 1920p, but no one's perfect. The AMD has to lean on its integrated Radeon 780M GPU that identifies as having 8 gigs of VRAM that it has to permanently steal from system memory. Thus, Snake Pass has to be reduced to medium details at 1000p to run smoothly, so it's down to 4 points. The next line in the sand is Diablo 3 performance, which is honestly what really matters. The AMD is not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to be good enough to enjoy. And that's how it is, as it achieves almost 60 FPS most of the time, and it doesn't choke when large mobs are on the screen. Sure, the frame rate dips to around 40 at times, but it's not a slideshow, and the AMD gets a 4. These days when I'm playing games, they're mostly retro games. The ideal retro gaming device has a brilliant screen with poppy colors, very little ghosting, passable speakers that don't lose the details from chiptune soundtracks, and, most importantly, good battery life. Admittedly, the AMD carries the torch with the better gameplay experience. It has almost zero ghosting, top-firing speakers to bring out better audio, and still plenty of CPU grunt to cover the turn-of-the-century home consoles. Unfortunately, it pales in comparison when it comes to battery life. 4 hours of 2D retro gaming is not that great, especially for an AMD CPU in energy saver. The Intel stays on for over 6 hours and 30 minutes, and while its peripherals aren't as great as the AMD, it doesn't really get its ass handed to it. The Intel gets the 5 to the AMD's 4. With that, it's time to tally up the scores. I wrote this script without keeping track of the sums, so we're both finding out the winner at the same time. And the winner is the Asus Zephyrus G14. Get out of here, you ugly little sh**. Okay, and the winner is the Intel by 1 point. Just goes to show how much these two versions of the same laptop model trade blows and properly justify their own existence. Can you imagine if the AMD had either the 75 watt-hour battery or the RTX 500 GPU? Or if the Intel had the OLED panel and an SD card reader? To be fair, if they did have everything in one package, you wouldn't have a reason to throw more money at Lenovo next year. Just some food for thought. For the bottom line, if you asked your grandma for a P14s for Christmas and the nice guy at Best Buy sent her home with the AMD one, you'll still love her. Both laptops are amazing competitors, and neither of them are the wrong choice for any purpose. My hope is that if you can't decide between these two, now you have a better idea of which way you're leaning after watching this video. Let me know in the comments below if you would rate these laptops differently, or if there's an aspect you were looking for that I didn't touch on. Next up is the Gaming With video for the Intel, where I'll really go into detail with gaming on the RTX 500. Stay tuned and subscribe so you don't miss it. And hey, give me a like if you really enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and you guys, have a good night.